Hello dear children, this is our first class, in fact my first class with you on Ways with Words. Ways with Words is a general paper and I shall be handling few sections, not sections, few poems from the section of poetry. As told earlier in an introductory video, I did tell you that I'll be handling the whole poetry section, but no, there will be a poem taken by a few other teachers as well, since I have only 1 hour with you assigned to you. So few of the poems from the section 1, that is poetry, shall be handled by me. So let's start with Sonnet 29 by William Shakespeare. Now before we move on to William Shakespeare, let me tell you a little bit about sonnet and its structure. How did sonnet come to England, or what is the sonnet, and so on. Sonnet is in fact unique among the poetic forms in Western literature. This form seems to have originated in the 13th century among the Sicilian school of court poets. And they were very much influenced by love poetry. So sonnet is basically to do with love poems. Okay. From there it spreads so in Sicily, and then it spread to Tuscany, where it reached the highest order or highest expression in the hands of the 14th century poet Petrarch. Okay, and his poems, a sequence of 317 sonnets, were in fact said to have idealized his beloved Laura. It is said to have been written for his beloved Laura, or it has idealized his beloved Laura. This 317 poems or sonnets, and this type of poetry became established, and later it became known as Italian sonnet, or called under Petrarch, because Petrarch is the one who popularized it and who made it the best form, or it reached the heights of expression under this great poet Petrarch, and therefore it came to be called as Petrarchan sonnet. Okay, so the Petrarch sonnet has its origin from Sicily to Tuscany, and there in Tuscany, that is the present day Italy, you have Petrarch in the hands of Petrarch, and then, so we'll just, we don't know how far we have to go to find the origins or roots of sonnet. We'll have to go all the way to Greece, but again, we are not very sure of it. So let's start with our starting point. Let us keep it to Italy. Okay, so sonnets emerged became popular, not emerged, became popular during the 14th century in Italy under Petrarch. So far I hope it is clear. Okay, and now how did this Petrarchan sonnet or the Italian sonnet come to England? So we have, when it comes to sonnets, we have 2 types of sonnets, and that is the Petrarchan sonnet or the Italian sonnet, and the English sonnet or the Shakespearean sonnet. Of course we have Spenserian sonnet as well, but let's, since you are undergraduate students, let's understand these 2 broad classifications. Petrarchan sonnet or the Italian sonnet. Petrarchan sonnet is also called as the Italian sonnet, and then you have the Shakespearean sonnet or the English sonnet. Now but before we move on to English sonnet or the Shakespearean sonnet, how did this Shakespearean sonnet or the English sonnet come to England? Well, it's a little bit of history there. Okay, so in during the 15th and the 16th century, England slowly started becoming a maritime country. Maritime means it's started establishing itself. Its trade routes, its sea routes all became very powerful. And it was under King Henry VIII and Queen, his daughter, later his daughter Queen Elizabeth, that England started becoming the present, or a powerful country. You can't call it a country because it's still the notion of country, nation and all this came only after the world wars. So till then European countries were a kind of segregated whole, you can say a segregated whole. They were all different kingdoms, each occupying another and then establishing control over it and all those things. So you can't call it a nation, but for our reference or for our easier understanding, let's call it a nation. So the England became powerful under whom? Under Queen Elizabeth and of course before her father King Henry VIII. So that is, it became a maritime country. Of course King Henry VII was even more powerful, and eighth and King Henry VIII, and then you have Queen Elizabeth. Okay, in between you have Queen Mary, but then Queen Mary dies and then it is passed on to Queen Elizabeth, first to Edward and then to Queen. You will be studying that in history, especially the English students, but for the BCom students, you just have to understand King Henry VIII is the father of Queen Elizabeth. All right, so it is under King Henry VIII and Queen Elizabeth that England becomes powerful. All right, so you have the trade routes. London becomes a commercial hub and the trade routes started taking place. Sea routes became very popular. England was becoming very rich and very powerful also. So several diplomats were sent to various parts of the European continent, especially to Italy, and therefore two diplomats who were Sir Thomas Yacht. It is pronounced Yacht in your textbook. It is there. It is mentioned, but it is don't pronounce W-Y-A-T-T, but it is to be pronounced Yacht. Okay, Thomas Yacht and Henry Howard, who was the Earl of Surrey. Earl is a name given a place, a prominent place, like you have the noble, it's the prince, and also earls. They are also from the noble class, aristocrats. So Henry Howard was the Earl of Surrey, and Sir Thomas Yacht and Henry Howard both were diplomats sent to Italy on diplomatic mission. So when they went to Italy, they came across this Petrarchan sonnet. They came to read a few Petrarchan sonnet. They came to read some of these love poems written by Petrarch. And Henry Howard, the Earl of Surrey, as well as Sir Thomas Yacht, both were not just diplomats, but they were also poets. And therefore, they fell in love with sonnet. And they, along with the other diplomatic missions, so when they brought back, when they came back, they not just brought back some culture and what they went for, trade, establishing trade with Italy, but they also brought back few important aspects like the sonnet. They fell in love with sonnet and they brought this sonnet form to Italy, which was introduced by whom? By the Italian poet Petrarch, okay, in the 14th century. But here this is happening in the 16th century. So when they went to Italy on a diplomatic mission, they came across some of the poems written by Petrarch and they brought it to England. So when their mission was complete, they brought back the sonnet structure as well. However, they wanted a small change. They did not want to follow the same Petrarchan sonnet form. So what they did, they remodeled it, they redefined it and remodeled it and to what we call the English sonnet. Shakespeare is said to have used this type of sonnet, and because he popularized it, he named it the English sonnet. And because it was Shakespeare who used this mostly, we call it Shakespearean sonnet. The English sonnet is also known as Shakespearean sonnet. Of course, we have the Spenserian sonnet also, but we are not going to look into that. English students will be studying that in detail soon, but others, you just have to remember two types of sonnets. Petrarchan sonnet, which is in Italy, it is otherwise called Italian sonnet, and you have the English sonnet, which is brought to England by Thomas Yard and Sir Henry Howard, the Earl of Surrey, and they termed it or named it English sonnet, which later was popularized by Shakespeare, and hence we call it Shakespearean sonnet. So these two types of sonnets, Petrarchan sonnet and the Shakespearean sonnet, the difference lies in their rhyme scheme. You may have studied rhyme scheme when you did your 10th standard, 11th and 12th. Of course, in 10th, 11th and 12th you have English. Even though you may have taken commerce stream, you may have taken humanities or science, but whatever the stream be, English was common to all these three streams. And you may have studied many poems, and you may have come across the rhyme scheme, right? So rhyme scheme, this rhyme scheme is what makes the Petrarchan sonnet different from the English sonnet. So in Petrarchan sonnet, the rhyme scheme is ABBA, ABBA. For easier method, we can call it Abba, Abba, okay, so that you won't forget. So it'll click on your, the next time you read, it will just click. So instead of saying ABBA, ABBA, which may be a confusion, you can just term it Abba, Abba. And then this ABBA, ABBA or Abba, Abba is in the first 8 lines. We call those first 8 lines octave. Okay, it's called octave. The first 8 lines of the sonnet is octave, and then you have the remaining 6 lines. So sonnet becomes a lyric of 14 lines. So the remaining 6 lines we have, that is called the sestet. Okay, the sestet consists of the rhyme scheme, or it is the rhyme scheme of sestet is CDE, CDE. So that is Petrarchan sonnet. Petrarchan, the rhyme scheme of Petrarchan sonnet. English students may have to keep this in mind, because you will pick this up in the next semester when you study reading poetry, which is now termed appreciating poetry for you. So in that you will have Petrarchan sonnet. Of course, you will be studying various forms of English poetry, and there you will be studying the Petrarchan sonnet. So the English students will have to bear this in mind. Of course, the BCom students will also have to have this in mind, but then you just have to remember Abba, Abba, CDE, CDE. Okay, and divided into octave and sestet, first 8 lines, octave, the last 6 lines, then the 6 lines is sestet. Okay, so that's the Petrarchan sonnet. Now let's see how it is different from the Shakespearean sonnet. Shakespearean sonnet, in Shakespearean sonnet, the rhyme scheme of Shakespearean sonnet is AB, AB, CD, CD, EF, EF, GG. Now this you have to study by heart, because this is a recurring, repeated question for your university exam. Even if we call you from in the morning and wake you up, you must be able to say AB, AB, CD, CD, EF, EF, GG. That's Shakespearean sonnet. Okay, so and Shakespearean sonnet has a couplet. The last GG, if you look at that last GG, it is a couplet. Okay, the 2 lines which has the same rhyme. So Shakespearean sonnet, what is a sonnet first and foremost? Sonnet is a lyric of 14 lines. There are 2 sonnets can be broadly classified into 2, Petrarchan sonnet and Shakespearean sonnet. In Shakespearean sonnet, you have 14 lines, and next we should, the next thing that you have to remember is the rhyme scheme: A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. And then another thing that you have to remember is it is divided into 3 quatrains. Now if you take the book, if you just open your book and you look at those lines, you will understand. So look at the first sonnet 29, the first chapter in your textbook, children. So you will find 3 quatrains. So what is a quatrain? Quatrain consists of 4 lines. Quatrain consists of 4 lines. So you will have, you look at the text, you will find it that it is divided into 3 quatrains. Okay, 3 quatrains, and the last 2 line forms the couplet, the last 2 lines. So 3 quatrains and 1 couplet. 3 quatrains means 1 quatrain consists of 4 lines. Okay, so 3 quatrains, and then finally you have a couplet which makes it 14 lines. So this you have to bear in mind, you have to remember this. Okay, so Shakespearean sonnet, 14 lines, it's a sonnet of 14 lines. It is divided into 3 quatrains, and it consists of a couplet. Then the rhyme scheme of Shakespearean sonnet is A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. Clear? All right. And what is to do with this couplet? What is the use of this couplet, and what does the quatrain tell us? In the quatrain, the first 3 quatrains, the poet establishes the theme. The poet tells you what the poem is about. There would be normally it's a conflict or a problem that the poet is addressing. So the first 3 quatrains he will address or tell you the theme or the problem which is troubling the poet, and then the last 2 lines, that is the couplet, he will resolve these problems will be resolved, and finally it ends beautifully, the problems being resolved either in hope, it would be a prayer or a hope, the poet would console himself. So anyway, the problem is resolved in the couplet. Okay, so the three quatrains, the use of 3 quatrains establishes the theme, the couplets resolves the theme or the problem. I hope that much is clear to you. And now we shall move on to William Shakespeare. How many of you have studied or read his plays? I wouldn't ask how many of you have read his plays, because I understand reading Shakespeare's plays, it is in the, it's not Old English. Okay, many students have the habit of saying Shakespeare has written Old English. No, Old English is different. The period, if you look at the period of literature, Old English refers to the period of the Celtic tribes, okay, the Scandinavian, the Celtic tribes, which is before 10th century itself. Okay, and then so you have the Old English, Middle English, and then the modern English. So the modern English, the early modern English actually begins with Chaucer, Geoffrey Chaucer, and then it moves on. What we have is actually the modern, the latest, what we have is the modern form, but modern Shakespeare's English is actually early modern English. It's not Old English. Don't think that is Old English. Okay, Old English is not easy. It is not, you can't say it is not easy to understand. It is not comprehensible at all. You won't be able to understand anything. It would be like listening to that language in Bahubali, totally different language. You can't make out a word that they speak. It's totally different, a kind of tribal language. All right, so this modern English, but again it is early modern English, and therefore I wouldn't ask you, have you read the play? Of course you may have studied the play. If you have studied or the play, or if you have read the abridged versions, so the adapted versions, you would know. Okay, you may have in your 10th standard, either you may have studied Merchant of Venice, or some of you may have studied Julius Caesar. Then some may have studied some of his poems, sonnets, especially. So these are Romeo and Juliet. All these are plays that gained him, or that has made him popular even to this very day. Okay, William Shakespeare. I would also request you to watch this movie, Shakespeare in Love, to get an idea of Shakespeare. It's an adapted, it's a modern kind of movie. Of course, there are, as an English student, you will need references, you will have to pay attention to it in detail, but otherwise you can also just watch the movie and you will be able to understand that the beauty of Shakespeare's plays. Okay, so watch the movie if you like. Now, William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare was an English poet, a playwright, and an actor. He is widely regarded as the greatest writer in English language and is also the world's preeminent dramatist. He is often called as the Bard of Avon. Now, what is Bard? What do you mean by Bard? Bard means poet. It's another word for poet. Okay, he is said to have been, again I say said to have been because we do not know the exact date. So it's based on his baptism date that we have come to this particular date. So he is said to have been born on April 23rd, 1564 in Stratford upon Avon as John Shakespeare's and Mary Arden's third child. He is probably said to have been educated at King Edward VI's Grammar School in Stratford, where he learned Latin and a little Greek and read Roman dramatists. He had to discontinue his education at the grammar school at the age of 10 or so because his father fell into hard times. His father, who was a merchant, a glover, one who sells gloves. Now, not this kind of surgical gloves that we have, these leather gloves. Leather gloves and all were considered as items or materials of luxury. And in fact, he was very rich. Okay, he was from a very rich family, and so soon from a glover he tried to dabble with politics also. He was a mayor for some time. However, he fell into hard times and he was arrested. His father, Shakespeare's father, John Shakespeare, he was arrested and the whole family fell into financial strain, and Shakespeare is said to have been removed from the school, and so therefore he had to discontinue his studies. At the age, another thing that you have to remember of bear in mind about Shakespeare is because all these had an intense or tremendous effect on his plays as well as his sonnets. Now, at the age of 18, he married Anne Hathaway, who was much elder to him. He was senior. She was senior to him, and it is said to have been a rushed marriage, a hurried marriage, because Anne Hathaway became pregnant, and therefore Shakespeare was forced to marry her, and their marriage happened. It was a rushed or a hurried marriage. And another thing, because of their difference of age, not everything was happy. It was not a very happy married life. So Shakespeare is said to have, after his children were born, Shakespeare is said to have shifted to London, and he began as an apprentice to a very prominent writer, a playwright who is said to be Robert Greene, a very important playwright of the period, and he was a university educated man. Now, Shakespeare is said to have written more than 20 plays. The plays written by Shakespeare have a reputation of being among the greatest in the English language, especially in Western literature. Traditionally, his plays are divided, traditionally we can divide a play into tragedy, history and comedy, and his plays, it is that his tragic plays that has been, or that can be called the most significant and most discussed plays, especially in the 19th and the 20th century. His tragedies include Hamlet, Othello, King Lear and Macbeth, which are all very famous plays. Several movies are also made, several movie adaptations are also made based on these plays. The primary focus of these tragedies is on the tragic flaw. Now, what is this tragic flaw? Or flaw is a mistake. A mistake that the hero or the protagonist does, which leads to his tragedy, which leads to his misery or state of misery. Now, this tragic flaw in Othello, it is because of Othello's passion, his extreme passion, and if you look at Hamlet, it is because of a particular habit of his mind, Hamlet's procrastination, keeping things to, procrastinating, the delay in taking decision is the one that leads to Hamlet's tragedy. In Othello, his extreme passion, his doubts and suspicion, his inferiority complex that leads to his tragedy. He kills Desdemona. So these are all these can be considered as a tragic flaw of the heroes. Now, coming to his sonnets. Now, his sonnets are 154 in number. Now, remember this number, okay? 154 sonnets. Shakespeare has written 154 sonnets. Of course, he has written more than that, and some of his sonnets are in some of his plays. You have those in his plays. You have it in Romeo and Juliet and many other plays of his as well. But as sonnets, as a set of sonnets, his personal sonnets, he has written 154 sonnets. Okay. Now, Shakespeare's sonnets, if you look at Shakespeare's sonnets again, they are a departure. There is a departure from the traditional style of sonnet. We discussed that when we started this video, how Petrarch used it to speak about, idealize his beloved. They were all mostly love poems, but when we come to Shakespeare, we see a departure from this age-old tradition of worshipping a beloved. Normally, it is a goddess, an unobtainable love. That is removed, or he changes. He's kind of rebelling against these old traditions, which were the prime focus of Petrarch or Dante or Philip Sidney. All these, they focus mostly on love poems, which they idealized their beloveds. But Shakespeare seems to be moving away from that tradition. His is mostly personal vows and sorrows. So Shakespeare, in his sonnets, in 154 sonnets that he has written, he introduces two people in his sonnets. So he introduces one, the first one is that of a young man. We do not, even now it is debatable as to who this young man is. There are many critics have different opinions to this young man. Still it is obscure. So he also introduces a dark lady. This dark lady is said to be Mary Fitton, who was a mistress or a maid in a nobleman's court. Okay, and she was a kind of a temptress. Shakespeare has used her, or has spoken about her as a temptress. Okay, so the whole sonnets, if you look at it, as I told you, it's a departure from the traditional sonnet, and you will see lust, you will see homoeroticism, misogyny, infidelity, and so on. This from 1 to 126, the sonnets are addressed to this young man, and the last 28 sonnets is addressed to last few 28 sonnets are to the dark lady, and the last one, that is the 154th sonnet, is a general sonnet actually. So it is mostly allegorical in nature. The young man is probably, critics believe or state that, many have different opinions, okay, so we cannot come to this conclusion that the young man that he is referring to is so and so. We can't come to that conclusion. It's still being debated. So we don't know whom his reference to, because he has not named anybody in the play. So based on his acquaintance, we can say that probably it would be either Earl of Pembroke or Earl of Southampton, who were his patrons. So looking at the way he has described that young man, it is most probable that he is speaking about Earl of Southampton. Okay, so the young man that perhaps, again I would use the word perhaps, and don't forget to use that word perhaps in your university exams as well. So that's very important. Perhaps it is Earl of Southampton that he is addressing in sonnets 1 to 126 sonnets. So sonnet 29 also you will have the reference to Earl of Southampton, probably Earl of Southampton, and the lady, as I told you, is Mary Fitton. And in the first 17 poems, the first 17 poems, Shakespeare's sonnets, they are traditionally called procreation sonnets. Again, that's also very important. Procreation, what is procreation? Have children, right? Get married and have children. So here in the first 17 poems, Shakespeare is addressing to this young man to marry. This young man refuses to marry. He doesn't want to marry. So he says that you are very beautiful and your beauty should be passed on to the next generation. So he is requesting this young man to marry and have children in order to immortalize his beauty by passing it to the next generation. So therefore, we can say that the first 17 poems of the sonnet are called procreation sonnets. Now other sonnets express, most of them express the speakers. Now we can say that it is Shakespeare. We don't, again, since it is written during it is considered to be personal sonnets, we can say that the speaker is Shakespeare. So other sonnets in this 154 sonnets, they speak about the speaker's love for the young man, and also a warning, and also his love, his passion, his lust for the dark lady. So they mostly brood upon loneliness, death, transience of life, and so on. So before we begin the sonnet 29, I would also like to tell you I want you to bear two things in mind. We studied sonnet, what sonnets are. We did a discussion on Shakespeare, his personal, his plays as well as his personal life. We also discussed sonnet and his sonnets, which is divided into 154, divided into two, totally 154 sonnets, and how again it is further divided. But this, before moving on to our chapter, that is sonnet 29, there are two important things that you have to remember or bear in mind. And the first one is, I told you Shakespeare, after his marriage to Anne Hathaway, he came to London, he shifted to London, okay, after having children he shifted to London, and he became an apprentice to whom? Robert Greene. He was working under Robert Greene. He used to edit his plays. So since he was not educated, he is university educated, he was like a clerk Okay, what you have a clerk, and remember it is not clerk. All have the habit of pronouncing it as clerk. No, that word clerk is not correct. It is clerk. Okay, it is to be pronounced clerk. Okay, that's the correct pronunciation. So he was working as a clerk under whom? Under Robert Greene. And he used to edit, so mistakes and all he would edit for, or like a secretary also. Okay, so he would do all those work that has to be done. And Robert Greene's office, he was a member of University Wit. Now who is this University Wit? University Wit is a group, a group where you have the university educated people. You had Christopher Marlowe, Robert Greene, Thomas Kidd, Thomas Nash, and few others who were prominent playwrights of the period. And they would all gather in Robert Greene's office, and they would discuss plays. Now it is said so that Shakespeare has heard many plays from them and has used some of their plays, some of the plots from their plays in his plays, and that could be one reason why Robert Greene was angry with Shakespeare. Robert Greene warns others. When Shakespeare slowly started becoming popular, when he stopped working under Robert Greene and he slowly took up playwriting, or he became a playwright, and he started directing plays, and he slowly became popular. Robert Greene was very angry. He was green with envy. Robert Greene, green with envy, very jealous. And he warned the other playwrights or the other university wits, he warned them to be careful of Shakespeare. In fact, he was ruining his reputation. Robert Greene's jealousy, since he was very jealous of Shakespeare, he was ruining Shakespeare's reputation. He called Robert Greene, called Shakespeare an upstart crow beautified by our feathers. Now this scathing comment, an upstart crow, an upstart means one who starts, just a beginner, an amateur person, and he is beautified by our feathers, that is the feathers of the university wit. So he says that he is not original, in the sense that he is not original, he is just amateur, not original. All his plays are, whatever he has is not original. There is also one instance where Thomas Kidd has lost his play Hamlet. Thomas Kidd, who is a famous playwright noted for his Spanish tragedy, he lost one of his plays called Hamlet, and Shakespeare is one person accused of having stolen it. There are again, it is just various, there are things, critics have different opinions about this. Anyway, all these people were a little jealous of him. Okay, so this scathing comment of Robert Greene upset Shakespeare, and he was really depressed by this, and this is addressed in the poem Sonnet 29. This is, though it is not clearly visible from the words, words that he has used in the sonnet, we can understand to whom he is referring. He is actually referring to Robert Greene's scathing comment. So one reason, anguish or the depression that Shakespeare is facing in Sonnet 29, one reason is Robert Greene's scathing, bitter comment on Shakespeare. Second reason, or second thing that you have to have in mind, this sonnet itself was written, all these sonnets he started writing because the theatres were closed. It was a time when the theatres were closed due to the outbreak of plague in 1592. There was a plague, and therefore the theatres were closed, and Shakespeare, being a playwright, he could not sell his plays to the company, and therefore he lost his job. He became, he was engulfed in misery and poverty. Thus, with plague and poverty looming, it is expected that he fell in disgrace in fortune. So that's how the poem starts, when in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes. So that is a reference to what? Reference to his sad, miserable condition where he does not have any job, he is jobless, he is poor, and on top of it he has, if you look at the second line also, I all alone beweep my outcast state and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate. Why is he cursing his fate? One, it is the disgrace that he has to face. Disgrace, two reasons. One, scathing comment which is being circulated by Robert Greene about Shakespeare, especially Robert Greene in his deathbed, he said this, okay, so it has a very importance there. People started believing Robert Greene. So there Shakespeare's reputation is affected. So one reason is that, another one is the closure of all these, the theatres being shut down due to the outbreak of plague, and he becoming or being engulfed in poverty and misery. No, so that's with the introduction. I'm not going to begin the I'm not going to begin the poem today. We shall begin the poem in the next class. So I hope you understood. I want you to take this down. Now the students must have a notebook for Ways with Words. It should be a separate book. I often find students with one notebook meant for everyone, all the teachers. One notebook for commerce, for English, for communicative English. No, that shouldn't be. You should have a separate notebook for each subject, especially Ways with Words. I want you to write it down, listen to the video and write it down. Take note of it, so that will be easier for you. And you will have assignments. There is a video, a technology based, how to use technology, be friendly like students and technology. The Clement sir will be telling you how to convert your assignments to PDF and then send it to the teachers. And remember, we shall also be checking for plagiarism, so you can't just cut and paste. If you are cutting and pasting, don't do it. Base it on the video and do little bit of reference on your own and then send it to us. Okay, so you will have assignments and they will be counted for your internal exams, okay, markings and all. So don't skip the assignments. So thank you and keep safe.